Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Sightlines webinar, Take Control of Your Facilities. I'm Frank Hollister, Senior Director here at Sightlines, and your presenter for today. We are pleased to host this educational webinar as part of our ongoing commitment to thought leadership and facilities management. That thought leadership includes webinars, blogs, articles, our annual member conference, and a variety of presentations with our members at state, regional, and national conferences. Today we have over 40 campus attendees with us, representing leadership from both finance and facilities, and representing schools that are public and private, and large and small from across the country. Our goal today is for you to leave today's webinar with a clearer understanding of key strategies you can employ to take control of your facilities by changing the conversation on campus and connecting capital, space, and operations in a more holistic way. Why do that? To drive better institutional policies on stewardship, make better, more strategic and sustainable decisions, and ultimately generate better outcomes toward managing your institution's largest asset, your facilities. So let's get started by reviewing the agenda for today's webinar. First, we will briefly introduce our firm, who we are, what we do, and how we impact campuses with our services. We will then review the major challenges facing facilities leadership to set the stage for a discussion of the 5 strategies in changing the conversation on campus. We'll review those strategies and, in doing so, highlight several case studies demonstrating the results achieved by Sightlines members when they take proactive measures to address the challenges. Our presentation should last approximately 30 minutes, leaving plenty of time for questions, and we will pose and answer those questions at the end of the call. Jay Perlman and Eric Nolan from our marketing team are on the line to moderate the questions. Guys, do you want to share with everyone how they can ask questions during the webinar?
Sure, Frank. If everybody can open up the orange arrow on the right side of your screen, you can very easily see that there's a box on the bottom that provides you a place where you can enter a question. We're going to try to make sure that we answer as many of the questions as we possibly can within the time that we have.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it. So now let's get started. So who are we and what role do we play in higher education facilities management? Sightlines is a facilities advisory firm that helps campuses optimize their capital investments and increase their operating effectiveness. We do this by applying the same analytical rigor you apply to your endowment to your facilities to help make better data-driven decisions about your largest asset. With that toolkit, we use a common vocabulary and consistent methodology to deliver our services. We work with institutions of all wealth, public and private, large and small, including many of your peers. We measure, analyze, and benchmark hundreds of key performance metrics relating to the space, capital, operations, service, and energy. And what's really interesting and useful to our members is how we connect the dots between those data points. For example, how the age and construction era of your campus impacts your capital profile and operating budgets, or how density of your buildings impacts maintenance or custodial staffing and resources. And we'll touch on several examples of these interrelationships later when we talk about the 5 strategies for success. We also place all of those key performance metrics in a common baseline database. We provide analysis, presentations, and recommendations on the state of your campus, and do so both longitudinally or historically and reliably compared to peers. So you know where you were, where you are, and where you're going with all of your key performance metrics. 2 other important facets of our approach is we use predictive analytics to measure the impact of future life cycles of buildings and major systems coming due, coupled with our analysis of your deferred maintenance and backlogs. And we also create performance dashboards to help you set and track performance to your goals while comparing to class institutions in our membership. And then finally, we house all of your data, all of your peer comparisons, and our tremendous insights in a member portal, which is accessible to you and our members 24/7, 365. What I just briefly described is our return on physical assets, or ROPA Plus service. ROPA Plus is that foundational toolkit that allows you to change the conversation around facilities at your campus and provide a 360-degree view of your physical plant and that asset's value, resources, risks, and opportunities. We also have other customized solutions that connect our ROPA Plus with your institutional mission and finance around helping you define facilities needs and develop multi-year capital plans with our building portfolio solutions. With our space utilization solution, we help you optimize and monetize your educational space. And with our sustainability solution, we help you analyze and maximize your energy and carbon emission reduction goals and fulfill various reporting requirements to make your campus greener. We have an international client base in the United States and Canada that includes 325 plus ROPA members in 40 states and several provinces. We serve flagships, publics, privates, state systems, and campuses large and small across North America. What's really interesting about that is that the growth of our database, our experiences, and knowledge of best practices has been the engine behind our insights, our national thought leadership, and the impact on campus. Several key metrics demonstrate the breadth and depth of our ROPA Plus database, including key performance metrics on a total of 450 campuses, over 1 billion gross square foot, over 15 billion in capital and operating budgets, plus the operating metrics on 40,000 buildings and 50,000 staff. In fact, over the last 2 years, we've added 100 new campuses to our membership and database, so the facilities intelligence tools that we provide become more powerful year over year. With that brief overview, let's turn our attention to the key challenges facing higher education facilities, and that will set the stage for a discussion of the 5 strategies for success. Many experts agree we are at a pivotal point in the history of higher education, and the industry is under a microscope. There are a number of issues that are converging at the same time, including government aid for education has fallen drastically, enrollments are declining in many regions, but not all, and pressures are significant on both operating and capital budgets, while some think campus balance sheets are significantly weaker than they were several years ago. The challenges we've just described have direct impacts on higher education and are further exacerbated by 2 additional pressure points: the age and construction era of campus and growing facilities backlogs. We'll start with the construction era. We affectionately call this the camel chart, and it represents the root causes of one of the biggest challenges we all face: the aging campus and growing deferred maintenance. We plotted the construction date of all that gross square footage in our extensive database, and you can see 2 major humps in the camel. The first hump shows the post-war campus construction boom that peaked in the 1960s and 70s, in which over 40% of space in higher education nationwide was constructed. We all know these buildings are often built with lower quality construction, and they're requiring significant repair today. This wave of buildings neared its first keep-up cycles when minor life cycle needs and finishes became due or become due in the 1980s. However, we didn't stop building for long. The second wave, or the second hump of the camel, of campus construction hit in the 1990s or mid-2000s. These spaces tend to be of better quality overall, but more complex with higher tech controls and better finishes. The problem is that both of these groups of buildings are crossing thresholds at the same time. The post-war buildings in the first camel hump are now nearing 50 years old, a period when major systems require replacement, and the complex buildings in the second camel hump are nearing 10 to 15 years of age, a time when space approached their first round of renewal. So what we're seeing is essentially the catch-up needs of the older buildings are competing with the keep-up needs of the newer ones. And this is a major contributing factor to the alarming growth in facilities backlogs. Nationwide, facilities backlog liabilities are approaching the $100 a gross square foot mark, as you can see. And it's grown dramatically over the last 7 years. To us and many of our campuses, that $100 a gross square foot mark is a critical high water mark when projects and emergencies are picking you versus you having the ability to remain proactive and strategic about your decision making and your investments. So given what we've covered, the top priority is protecting the real prize, what we believe is your largest asset, your physical plant investment. As we've mentioned, higher education administrators have rigorous tools for managing endowments and financial assets, but not for facilities. And at all but the wealthiest institutions in the country, facilities are worth 4 to 5 times that of endowments. As campuses and the impacts of these challenges multiply, the risks and impacts to the multiple only become greater. The culture of facilities has changed. Today's facilities organization is asked to do more, be more, and have a seat at the table, given that you manage the institution's largest asset. This requires you to have better, more credible information at your fingertips. In the past, institutions had many levers to pull to address the challenges we just described. Higher education leaders could increase enrollment, raise tuition, borrow money, appeal for state support, or spend part of their endowment down. And most institutions did one or more of these over the years. But schools can no longer pull these levers as they did in the past. The number of high school graduates is level or declining in much, but not all of the United States, so increasing enrollment is not always an option. Tuition has outpaced inflation every year for 30 years, so campuses have to be very, very measured in increasing the cost of education, as this has been under the microscope. External funds like debt and state aid are no longer as readily available as before, or simply just harder to achieve, so you can no longer rely on additional expenditures. And to top it off, capital budgets have not regained ground lost during the recession, and inflation has reduced the purchasing power of operating budgets. So what if you had better tools for facilities management, tools and strategies similar to endowment managers to help you change the conversation on campus? With those tools, facilities would be treated more like a core business at the institution. You'd be able to make better, more informed, and data-driven decisions. You'd be able to align facilities and capital investments with your mission in finance. You'd be able to use predictive analytics to focus on outcomes and not inputs. And you could better tell your story and drive real change and actually be a hero on your campus. So how do you make this change? You start with a common vocabulary that can be articulated from the boardroom down to the boiler room and consider key strategies for success. Even in these challenging times, there are institutions that are able to manage and even get ahead with respect to facilities by employing several key strategies. We'd like to share some of those stories. Historically, colleges and universities have often relied on siloed conversations to determine campus policies. Decisions regarding space growth, capital allocation, and their effects on operations were often not integrated. The result was policies that did not encourage the critical evaluation and optimization of assets in a holistic way. Core to success is the creation of a new conversation. The conversation is inclusive of all the former three silos. For the first time, institutions are taking a hard look at space, asking questions like, do we really need it all? Are we really using what we have to the best of our ability? On the capital side, are the investments we're making supporting mission, preserving assets, or mitigating risk? And finally, how can both space and capital policy be integrated to reduce operating overhead and improve effectiveness of precious resources? So what do these new conversations lead to? How do people really make change happen? Access to the largest verified database of facilities metrics and meeting face-to-face with all of our members each year gives us unprecedented ability to analyze data and uncover best practices and share them with senior leadership on campus. We want to highlight 5 of those best practices here and show you how institutions are using our toolkit to look ahead, build strategically, have less but be more, keep up, and reward savings. Let's start with less can be more. If you remember our earlier remarks, campus leadership used to have more levers to pull to grow out of their problems in the past. Well, today that's no longer possible, or it's severely limited. As a result, a lot of campuses had to have some tough conversations around space. Again, asking questions like, do we really need all of the space that we have? Could we live with less? Do we really need to build that new building? We see some policies on campuses as a result of asking these hard questions and having these difficult conversations. A no net new space is a policy that has its roots in the sustainability world. Limiting growth means limiting increase in carbon emissions, but it also means limiting of future operating and life cycle needs. This policy means that no new space on campus will be built without the removal of an equal amount of deficient square footage. We've worked with institutions as large as Ohio State University that have adopted this policy after a hard look at the amount of square foot on campus. Some institutions view a no new net space approach as limiting, so some have adopted a variation on this policy which provides a little bit more flexibility, no new net backlog. So that's saying that no new construction can occur without the mitigation of an equal value of backlog. Here's an example of a no new net backlog in action. This graph shows how the University of Massachusetts reduced its deferred maintenance backlog by over 24% since 2005. They did this by taking a critical look at their current needs and making some very tough decisions. They did invest money to buy down the backlog, but they did this in a way that did not compound future needs. Some buildings were removed, some were renovated through replacement. The University of Massachusetts is not alone. Sightlines has been involved in several similar conversations with campuses across the country that have received attention and many more that haven't. Nationwide, we see institutions realizing that less can actually be more, including recent case studies at the University of Maine system and the West Virginia colleges and universities. The second strategy we'll discuss is build strategically. When you do need to build, it is important to build strategically. Here's a campus which Sightlines recently led through our annual Europa Plus process. You can see that campus density was a major issue. The institution had 7,500 more users per gross square foot than comparably sized campuses nationwide. The result was a widespread call from faculty for new classroom facilities. Essentially, the rallying cry was, build more classrooms. But did they really need more space? That was the question. Our look at utilization levels across the institutions actually did support it. As many points during the day, rooms were near 90% occupied with little flexibility on campus. But in the end, it wasn't the number of rooms which was the problem. It was the type of rooms. Teaching styles have shifted since the institution was founded, and most of the teaching stock was functionally obsolete. You can see that most courses were now taught with fewer than 25 students, while most rooms were actually larger lecture-style rooms. Construction was needed, but thinking strategically meant that they could also focus on reconfiguring and updating these larger rooms rather than constructing additional space as the only answer, thereby saving millions on new construction by optimizing their existing space. You don't always need to build strategically. You need to repair strategically. Let's take a look at that approach. Today, there's often too little integration in the assessment and repair process. Many institutions perform technical facilities assessments and then move straight to picking projects. And when that happens, we think that there's a lot of lost opportunities here. You don't harness operating knowledge, you don't tie project selection to mission or even master plans, and you ignore the financial capacity of today and tomorrow. As a result, you may miss opportunities to optimize resources, to balance program and mission with the technical needs of facilities. We think there's a better way. Sightlines has worked with a number of institutions on overcoming these challenges. The technical assessment is necessary, but is it truly just the first step? Our process takes a project list and optimizes project selection in a couple of ways. First, we involve the operating staff to validate and prioritize technical projects. We then organize projects into portfolios that tie to mission, and then we develop affordable capital plan scenarios that can be easily communicated to senior leadership. The conversation that this creates is invaluable on campus. Rather than presenting a project or a tactical plan that fixes broken buildings, you are presenting to senior leadership a more strategic plan fully aligned with mission, operations, and the financial realities of campus, including various models or options to repair strategically. Facilities is now seen as a strategic partner rather than just a support function. Looking ahead is another key strategy to consider in managing your largest asset. We talked about the building era earlier. We also talked about predictive analytics. Well, building age and component life cycles are just one of the many best predictive indicators that we have. Here is a campus with a generally young age profile and likewise a low backlog. Even though the campus was in excellent shape, as seen by the capital spending history exceeding annual need represented by the dotted line, the future was not so bright. And this is where ROPA Plus prediction capabilities was truly helpful to this campus. We modeled the 10-year capital renewal or life cycle needs, coupled with what we already knew about the space, the age, the operations, and deferred maintenance of campus. We can help the campus look ahead by predicting capital needs, risks, and opportunities into the future. So again, even though the campus was in good shape today, by 2017, needs would outpace expenditures, as you can see in the first spike. The second spike, occurring in 2020, demonstrates an even higher renewal need. Both require senior leadership to consider policy changes and capital investment plans that effectively think about setting aside funds for the rainy day that they can now see pretty clearly. Using predictive analytics with another campus, this one with about $230 million in total 10-year need and only $120 million to spend, we were able to model out several scenarios to optimize the direction and the impact of their precious capital dollars towards addressing that 10-year need. And this is just one scenario example in which we segment out immediate need in the gray, 10-year renewal need in the blue, and then the remaining need in yellow to help the campus make better decisions on their capital spend. Another strategy for consideration is the keep-up strategy. We talked about paying down backlog, predicting and acting on future needs, and lowering operating costs. Well, we think the best way for campuses to do that is to keep up with their existing needs. Independent validation of our member database has shown that $1 invested in planned maintenance or other annual stewardship yields multiple times its value in reduced operating expenditures and avoided backlog. We are a firm believer, and our members know this, in advocating for additional planned maintenance and stewardship investments, as those investments pay off handsomely. And finally, but just as mission critical as the other strategies, is rewarding savings and making savings reinvestments a policy that campus stakeholders can get behind and stay behind. We recommend that one of the best ways to achieve savings is to adopt policies to incentivize facilities leaders to achieve those savings. Here's an example of a campus that saw incredible energy performance. A 19% decrease in consumption, coupled with a 6% decrease in rates, yielded a 24% cash savings, or $9 million over 4 years. One of our recommendations is not to reallocate these savings to other parts of the institution, but to adopt policies that empower operators to continue this process and reinvest those savings back into facilities operations, or better yet, to reducing the backlog or creating funding for future life cycles. With this institution, over those 4 years, the majority of energy savings were recycled back into building systems and infrastructure projects to achieve greater efficiencies and further savings. And as you all know, investments in building systems, envelope, and infrastructure are more durable investments and have larger paybacks. You can see the significant increase in investments over 4 years in these areas really made significant impacts to the campus. So with facilities leaders able to keep these dollars in their budgets, the institutions improve morale of its workforce and further reduce consumption, which all have recurring paybacks, especially in the future. So that's an overview of Sightlines, the major challenges facing physical plant administrators and CFOs, the 5 strategies we recommend campuses consider to address those pressing and interrelated issues, and several case studies demonstrating the real impact our member campuses are driving by adopting those proactive strategies with our partnership. We would now like to open it up for questions. Jay or Eric, do we have any questions from the member audience?
Sure, Frank. Yes, we do. I'm going to ask them as they come in. One important question is, one audience member is about to initiate a master plan and is wondering how the type of analytics that you went through earlier in your talk can actually help her with that process.
No, excellent question. The way we look at master planning, or any planning for that matter, on campuses, we know, and you all know, that campuses are in perpetual planning cycle. So regardless of the type of plan or timing, our core value proposition shines through, or even these 5 strategies shine through, I should say. So helping campus leaders and their planning partners connect the dots with a baseline foundation of facilities intelligence, data analytics, and benchmarking really helps understand the facilities backlog, capital spending profiles, operating spending profiles, and then, of course, having an impartial third-party validation of the core facilities and financial metrics will certainly create that foundational data set. We've helped the master planning efforts at a number of campuses, both public and private, including the University of Hartford, University of Massachusetts, Ithaca College, and St. Edward's University over the last year or two with their master planning by providing both our ROPA Plus service and the building portfolio solutions and capital spending investment profile that we talked about earlier.
Great. Thanks, Frank. We received one other question in the meantime. It's a housekeeping question. People in the audience are interested as to how they can receive a copy of these slides. Everybody online will receive an email afterwards. That email will contain an actual recording of this as well as the slides that you've walked them through this afternoon. So that's great. A follow-up question to our initial question was, how long does that process that you spoke about take to complete at a typical institution?
No, another excellent question. Typically, our ROPA Plus process takes 15 to 18 weeks from start to finish, meaning from the time that we begin on-campus data collection and validation work through the extensive analysis, measurement, and benchmarking, ultimately to the final presentations that we'll make to campus leaders. That all takes place over approximately 15 to 18 weeks. We typically assign a member services team based on the size and complexity of campus and the scope of work that we've embarked on with our campuses. And that member services team will work with our campuses from start to finish. Our team leaders on those engagement teams have extensive experience. Many have 30 to 50 campus engagement and projects under their belts, so they're very, very experienced. And we can certainly share with you offline, if interested, in an engagement timetable sample after the webinar that comes out that 15 to 18 weeks start to finish engagement.
Thanks, Frank. We got a question regarding the last group of slides regarding energy cost. A member of the audience asked if we saw the reduced energy rates as of late that a lot of institutions are experiencing, relieving some of the pressures on facilities managers across the country. And I'm happy to offer some perspective on that if you'd like.
Absolutely, thanks.
So, working with a bunch of institutions, the answer is potentially yes. The energy rates in many parts of the country are down. Oil, of course, is driving a lot of that. But what we're seeing is institutions not necessarily thinking ahead with those dollars. And our recommendation is always to treat energy reductions as kind of a reserve fund or a bank. And our recommendation is always that you try to put those dollars into more asset-enhancing work, exactly like Frank spoke about. We like to see those dollars kept within operations. We like to see them help out with annual stewardship funds. We especially like to see those dollars to put back into infrastructure projects that help to kind of hedge your consumption as those rates eventually do rebound, which is always bound to happen. Unfortunately, what we often do see are those dollars treated as independent from the organization at large. They're oftentimes removed from operations in general and used elsewhere in the institution. So to answer the question, we do see those dollars creating opportunities for future gains, but more often than not, those funds tend to find their way out of facility budgets.
Thank you, Jay, for that perspective.
My pleasure. Final question that we have from the group here is, does this amount of information that you spoke about earlier require a tremendous amount of my staff's time and effort to collect?
Yeah, good question. With 15 years of experience providing our services to hundreds of campuses each year and being on those campuses each year, we know many of your staff have at least 2 full-time day jobs as it is, and they're extremely busy. We do all the heavy lifting and optimize our time with specific subject matter experts in areas such as energy or maintenance to collect and validate that data. Bottom line, our process does not require your staff to be with us over that 15 to 18 weeks full-time, and we are very adept at collecting and validating and presenting our findings with minimal impact to your staff's time, but certainly maximizing their expertise and institutional knowledge. I mean, who else knows your campus better? That's our approach.
Great. Thanks, Frank. That concludes questions from the audience at this point.
Okay, great. Well, if you haven't done so already, we encourage you to download a free copy of our annual State of Facilities article on our website. It provides even greater depth and commentary on these issues and more. We'd also encourage you to subscribe to our monthly newsletter to receive regular updates on current events and facilities. And as Jay mentioned earlier, we'll make today's presentation available to webinar attendees on our website, and you can easily download that content as well as other white papers and blog resources. On behalf of all of the Sightlines, we really appreciate you joining us for Take Control of Your Facilities webinar. We hope you found our time together beneficial toward understanding not only the challenges facing higher education facilities leaders today, but also the strategies that they're employing to overcome those challenges. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call me directly at the information up on the screen. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.